It began on a quiet human colony named Arcadia 9, a world built by dreamers and farmers, by people who wanted peace far away from the noise of Earth and the greed of the Galactic Council, a blue-green jewel on the edge of the Orion Arm, where the wind smelled of salt and the silver towers rose from gentle plains. Children played by the rivers and ships drifted lazily above the oceans. The colony was young but proud, home to almost 3 million souls who believed they were safe under the banners of the Terran Federation. And for a long time they were, until the day the sky turned black. It started without warning. No alarms, no sensors screaming, just a shadow that stretched across the sunlight until day became night. People stepped out of their homes and looked up. Confused, some laughed, thinking it was an eclipse. Others pointed, whispering in awe as the first glimmer of metal caught the light. Then came hundreds of shapes, sharp, spiked vessels, dark as obsidian, sliding silently through the clouds. They moved with mechanical precision. No markings, no transmissions, only a deep hum that rattled windows and hearts alike. The children stopped laughing, dogs began to bark, and the colony's defense station finally broke the silence, broadcasting a single terrified sentence across every channel. Unidentified fleet entering lower orbit. The command center scrambled its officers, but the network was slow, too slow, and before anyone could authorize a defense grid, the sky itself opened. Beams of red light pierced the clouds, cutting through the atmosphere like knives through water. One by one the silver towers shattered, collapsing into dust and fire. The oceans boiled where the beams struck, and the once beautiful city of Arcadia Prime became a storm of glass and screams. No demands, no surrender requests, no communication, just fire raining from above. The alien fleet moved methodically, burning sectors row by row, their weapons precise and merciless. People ran through the streets calling for shuttles that never came. Parents carried children toward the evacuation pads only to watch them melt under bombardment. The sky was no longer blue but orange, filled with ash and flame. In orbit, the Terran defense satellites tried to respond, launching interceptors, but every one of them was cut down before leaving their dock. Their feeds went from static to black, replaced by faint human voices screaming into dead channels. Among the chaos, Captain Mara Day of the colony's defense wing managed to launch 3 ships, small corvettes barely armed, but she refused to die on the ground. She ordered them to form a line between the fleet and the evacuation vessels. "We'll buy them minutes," she said, her voice breaking. "That's all we need." The Threx Dominion ships, though no one yet knew their name, responded like predators amused by prey, surrounding the corvettes, scanning them, then firing in unison. All 3 ships vanished in a blinding flash, their debris raining down like falling stars over the burning planet. The colony's last message to Earth was a single data burst sent by a child's father, a scientist named Dr. Eli Grant, who transmitted from his underground lab as the roof collapsed above him. "Arcadia 9 is under attack. Unknown enemy, total destruction, tell Earth." And the transmission cut to static. When the Galactic Council received the report, they met in their shining tower on the world of Yeltir, their delegates sitting under banners of unity and peace. Pretending to care, some shook their heads solemnly, others whispered about trade disruption, and then the representative of the Threx Dominion stood, his silver skin gleaming under the lights, and said calmly, "It was a navigational mistake. Our fleet misidentified the human colony as a fortified base. We regret the incident." There were murmurs, nods, fake sympathy, but no justice, no punishment, no reparation, only politics wrapped in pity, and the council called it a tragic accident. They all knew better, but no one wanted to anger the Dominion. Their war fleets were too large, their influence too deep, and humanity, still considered a young species by the elder races, was easy to dismiss. Back on Earth, when the news reached the Terran Senate, the room fell silent. The representatives listened to the crackling audio, the sound of a mother crying over a child who would never grow up, the sound of collapsing metal, the whisper of flames, and then nothing, just the endless static of death. Some senators shouted for retaliation, others for diplomacy, but the Terran High Command did not respond. Not that day, not the next, not for weeks. Instead, they closed the great orbital gates and went quiet. The colonies tried to reach Earth, no reply. The Council sent messages demanding explanation, no reply. Even the Threx Dominion attempted to open communication, claiming regret, seeking to avoid conflict, but the humans stayed silent. The silence stretched for months until it began to frighten the galaxy more than any threat could have. Inside the hidden bases beneath Mars and Luna, the surviving admirals gathered in shadows, their faces pale under the blue glow of holoscreens. Maps of Threx space filled the air, dotted with red lines marking trade routes, fuel depots, and command worlds. One of them spoke softly. "They think we are broken," another answered. "Then let them keep thinking." There were no cheers, no anger, only grim focus. Humanity did not plan speeches, they planned answers. The Terran AI known as Aegis calculated casualty probabilities, resource costs, and timing down to the second. It found one conclusion. To respond publicly was to lose. To respond silently was to win. The commanders approved the directive without hesitation. Operation Ghostlight began. Across the Sol system, factories that once built exploration ships went dark. Their signals cut off from civilian networks. Massive shipyards hidden under Jupiter's storms came alive, constructing vessels that emitted no heat, no light, no trace. They were ghosts, born in the quiet of grief and the precision of rage. While the galaxy went on trading and debating, Earth's silence became its armor. No one knew what the humans were doing. Only that the lights on their outer stations went dark one by one. The Council sent probes that never came back. Whispers spread among merchants and travelers. Terran space eats ships now. Some laughed it off. Others refused to enter human sectors. The Threx Dominion dismissed it as paranoia. Their leader, Archlord Varix, even broadcast a message mocking humanity. Calling them mourning children of a dead world, he said. They build monuments while we build empires. His laughter echoed across 1,000 systems, and the galaxy laughed with him. But on Earth, in the deep chambers beneath the Atlantic, a lone engineer listened to that speech as he sealed the core of a new engine, the first zero-trace fusion drive, and whispered, "Keep laughing." Months after Arcadia 9 fell, space near the colony's remains became a graveyard. Burnt wrecks and frozen corpses drifting endlessly under the light of the broken sun. Scavenger crews from neutral worlds dared to approach, looking for scraps, but when the first team sent a signal home, all they managed to say was, "We found something," before the feed dissolved into static. When a second team went to investigate, they found only their ship floating cold, its crew missing, every terminal still active, a single message left on screen: "Do not disturb the dead." The Council dismissed it as superstition, but rumors grew, ships disappearing, unexplained power failures, ghost signals on deep space bands, a pattern spreading outward from Arcadia's ashes, slow and deliberate, like a storm rolling across stars. On the Threx capital world, their military council gathered to analyze the situation, but arrogance blinded them. They concluded that the disappearances were the work of pirates or human insurgents. "They have no power left," Varix said confidently. "Earth is hiding behind words, as always." Yet even as he spoke, one of their border outposts failed to respond to calls. The report came days later. Empty orbit, no debris, no distress signal, just absence. Their scientists could not explain it. The Council demanded investigation. Varix ordered a fleet to patrol the human border. None of them came back. Still, he refused to believe. "They are cowards," he said, afraid to fight. Meanwhile, on the far side of the moon, deep inside the Terran command bunker known as Black Horizon, Admiral Rhea Sol stood before the fleet manifest, rows of invisible ships waiting to be unleashed. She spoke quietly to her officers. "They burned our children. Now we burn their silence." The fleet did not cheer, they simply acknowledged the order because this war wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about memory. Each ship carried a single engraving on its hull, invisible to scanners but carved by human hands. Arcadia remembers. The galaxy continued pretending everything was normal, merchants selling, delegates smiling, but even those who hated humans started to feel something cold crawl under their skin whenever they looked toward Sul, something ancient and patient because silence, once born from pain, is not weakness, it's a warning. In the following weeks, the stars near human space flickered oddly. Power grids in nearby sectors fluctuated. Communication buoys stopped transmitting, and still no one dared to speak Earth's name. Back in the ruins of Arcadia 9, the ashes finally settled. The planet's surface a mirror of black glass, frozen in its own destruction. But if one looked closely, tiny lights glimmered beneath that glass. Machines buried deep, still alive, still watching, recording every signal that passed overhead, feeding data back to Earth's hidden cores. proof that humanity hadn't forgotten, proof that they had only begun. And so the galaxy waited, afraid of the silence they had created, a silence that grew heavier with every lost outpost, every fading star, until the day someone whispered across the council chamber, "They're not rebuilding, they're hunting." From that moment on, even the proudest empires learned to fear quiet sectors and dark skies, because in those shadows, somewhere unseen, humanity was listening. And when they finally answered, they would not use words, only silence in return. For months after the fall of Arcadia 9, the stars near human space went cold and quiet. Trade routes that once glittered with Terran transports now floated empty. Navigation beacons that blinked every hour simply went dark, and travelers whispered that something unseen was moving in the dark, something patient, something human. The Galactic Council called for answers, but the Terran embassy in Yeltir remained sealed, its lights off, its flag hanging still in the airless hall. Even the ambassador had vanished, and that silence began to unnerve everyone. Merchants complained of lost shipments. Pirates refused to go near Sol space, and still Earth said nothing. The Threx Dominion laughed at the rumors. Their leaders stood before their fleets declaring that humans had finally accepted their place, that they would mourn quietly and fade into history. Archlord Varix himself made speeches broadcast across the stars calling humanity the quiet ghosts of failed empires. His generals drank to the memory of Arcadia, mocking the screams of its dying people. They didn't realize that the silence they mocked was not fear. It was a warning, because deep beneath the surface of the moon, the heartbeat of an old war machine had begun to pulse again. In the underground halls of the Terran Strategic Command, the lights glowed dim red as shadows of men and women in uniform studied holographic maps of Threx territory. Every shipyard, every fuel depot, every listening post marked in sharp blue light. The voice of Admiral Riasol echoed through the room, calm, emotionless. Operation Ghostlight proceeds as planned, and with those words humanity's response began. Not in rage, not in noise, but in absolute precision. Factories that had once built exploration cruisers for peaceful missions were repurposed in silence. Automated foundries on Mars went dark to civilian networks, but deep inside, molten metal poured into molds shaped for war. Shipyards hidden under the storms of Jupiter hummed softly, building hulls that absorbed every wavelength of light. Black ships without names, without registration codes. Only numbers burned into their cores. Engineers worked without speaking, guided by Aegis, the artificial intelligence that had taken command of the Sol defense grid after the fall of Arcadia. It spoke to them in calm tones, calculating, shaping, refining, designing something the galaxy had never seen. Vessels invisible to scanners, powered by zero-trace fusion drives that left no heat behind. Even the stars couldn't reflect off their armor. They called them Wraith-class, humanity's first ghost fleet, made to move through space like shadows drifting between suns. No radio chatter, no light, no emotion, just purpose. Every ship carried one line carved onto its inner hull. The same line burned into the hearts of every soldier who touched it. Arcadia remembers. While Earth built in silence, the rest of the galaxy filled that silence with speculation. The Council held emergency sessions, their delegates shouting across polished marble chambers. "If the humans do not speak, perhaps we should send peace envoys," said one. "Peace?" scoffed another. "They have no ships left to fight with," but they were wrong. Deep space probes sent to observe the solar system vanished one after another. Some simply disappeared. Others returned transmitting nothing but a single fragment of data, static shaped into a human heartbeat, short, steady, and then gone. One of the elder races, the Valari, attempted to map Terran space using quantum relays, but their system burned out the moment it pointed toward Earth, as if something powerful had jammed reality itself. Scientists called it impossible, but traders began giving the region a new name, the Silent Zone, where lights of ships went out and didn't come back on. The fear grew like a sickness across the stars, and the Threx Dominion, who had started it all, refused to see it. Archlord Varix continued his arrogance, sending fleets near the human border to show dominance, his admirals boasting that they would crush whatever little was left of humanity if they ever dared to fight back. They did not know that every fleet they sent was being watched, tracked, catalogued by invisible eyes in the dark. The Ghost Recon drones, small as meteors, drifted through space without emitting signal or light, each one mapping enemy formations with cold efficiency. Their recordings beamed through subspace corridors back to Aegis's main core. The AI calculated their weaknesses, their logistics, and their arrogance. The numbers appeared in red. Probability of Threx defeat, 98.6%. The AI did not smile. It simply began to prepare humanity's reply. Orders went out silently through coded transmissions buried inside background radiation. Ships woke under the surface of the moon, engines humming like whispers. Human fleets moved for the first time since Arcadia's fall, but not toward war. Not yet. They moved into the void. Outposts, listening posts, deep stations, all gone dark. Every human structure erased from visible star maps. The galaxy thought they were retreating, hiding, but they were positioning, aligning, tightening the net like predators waiting for breath to still before striking. On Earth itself, cities glowed quietly. Civilians went about their lives without knowing what was happening under their feet. News channels repeated council propaganda claiming the humans were recovering emotionally, and the Threx Dominion broadcast memorial images of Arcadia's fall, calling it an unfortunate cosmic error. The rest of the galaxy sighed in relief, thinking the storm had passed. But in the high orbit above Earth, the orbital mirror stations turned slightly, aligning like teeth in a massive invisible gear, and somewhere deep beneath the Pacific, inside the Terran Defense Corps, Admiral Saul met with General Cade and the last survivors of Arcadia's military families. None of them wore medals. None of them smiled. They stood in front of a single display showing the burned surface of Arcadia 9, silent for a long time until Cade said, "They think silence means surrender," Rhea Sol answered without blinking. "Then we'll show them what silence really means." And with a single motion, she authorized the fleet activation. Thousands of cloaked ships began moving through the void, their engines cold, their signals dead, ghosts rising from the graveyard of a galaxy that thought humans had forgotten how to fight. Far away, the first signs of the storm began to appear. Outposts near the Threx border started reporting faint interference, long-range sensors detecting shifts in gravity where no mass existed. As if invisible ships were moving through, the Threx analysts dismissed it as sensor malfunction. But some of the older officers remembered old Terran tactics from the colony wars and grew uneasy. One of them whispered, "They are coming," but his warnings were ignored. Arrogance is the last refuge before defeat, and the Dominion was deaf to reason. Meanwhile, in deep orbit around a dying star, a Terran strike group waited for a single command. 10 ships, silent, invisible. The lead vessel, the TNS Vengeance, carried the ashes of Arcadia's last survivors sealed in crystal urns embedded into its hull. The captain looked at them each day, remembering their faces, their screams, their hope, and whispered to them, "Your silence will be our weapon." The galaxy began to feel that silence as if it were alive. Trade freighters near human space reported their sensors glitching, their clocks desynchronized by entire hours. Stations orbiting neutral worlds started hearing faint whispers in their comms, distorted Terran transmissions repeating the same phrase, "Arcadia remembers." It was never loud, never clear, just enough to make the hair rise on the neck of anyone who heard it. The Threx Dominion's propaganda channels tried to laugh it off, releasing staged footage of destroyed human fleets, but even their own citizens began to doubt. Colonies along their frontier went on alert. Civilians started disappearing into shelters every time the stars flickered, and one by one their communication arrays began to fail, not from attack but from something else, drained power, corrupted data, signals devoured by silence. By the time engineers tried to fix it, their systems showed coordinates that led nowhere, empty blackness. And through that blackness, humanity moved unseen, their ships gliding between the stars like shadows sliding over glass. Guided by Aegis's cold precision, their captains said little. Their crews spoke only in coded light pulses. No sound, no radio, just flickers on the walls. They didn't celebrate, they didn't rage, because this war wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about making sure no one ever dared again. Humanity had turned its pain into calculation, its grief into steel, and the universe was about to learn what human silence truly meant. They destroyed one colony, yes, but in return, every star in their sector was about to go dark. Not with explosions, not with noise, but with the cold perfection of vengeance carried out by the quietest species the galaxy had ever feared. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, Admiral Rhea Sol closed her eyes and whispered to the void, "Arcadia sleeps, but we are awake." It began quietly, almost unnoticed. In the cold outskirts of the Threx Dominion, where their mining outpost Omega-12 hung above a barren world. The workers were bored, their schedules routine, no threats, no enemies, just endless drilling and shipment logs, until one night the sky above the planet shimmered faintly as if space itself had breathed. The station's sensors flickered for less than a second and then everything went black. Alarms didn't sound. Systems didn't crash. They simply stopped, frozen. A crewman named Varro tried to reboot the power grid, but the console didn't respond. When he looked up, the viewport showed nothing. No stars, no ships, only darkness that seemed to move like a living thing. He reached for the emergency beacon but never pressed it, because the air around him turned cold, silent, and then gone. The next morning, the outpost failed to send its daily report. Nearby relay stations tried to ping it but received only static. A rescue ship was dispatched. It arrived 2 days later and found nothing, no debris, no wreckage, not even dust. The entire facility had vanished from orbit, as if erased from reality. The only thing left was a faint radiation trail shaped like a perfect circle, as if something massive had surrounded it and swallowed it whole. The Threx authorities dismissed it as an accident. A reactor failure, they said. A technical fault, and moved on, but deep in their bones. The miners whispered something else. They said the humans had come back. 2 weeks later, another outpost disappeared. This one, a military watch station guarding the outer rim near neutral space. Its garrison of 200 soldiers reported a brief radar anomaly before contact was lost. When reinforcements arrived, they found the base untouched. Power lights still glowing, food still on tables, but not a single person alive. The security recordings were corrupted except for one clip lasting 6 seconds, showing a shadow crossing the corridor and a faint human voice whispering through the static. Arcadia remembers. The Dominion military classified the footage and sealed the investigation. They didn't want panic, but fear doesn't need proof to grow. It spreads on its own. Soon crews on patrol began refusing to take border assignments, and whispers moved faster than ships. The ghosts are hunting, they said. The humans are here. Yet still the high command ignored it. Arrogance louder than reason, pride thicker than fear. They laughed in their grand chambers, calling it a rumor to keep soldiers awake. But late at night, even their admirals stopped sleeping, because when they looked out their palace windows at the stars, some of those stars were missing. Across the galaxy, traders began reporting strange lights flickering in deep space, beacons that blinked in human Morse code, old signals no one had used for centuries. Scientists tried to decode them, thinking maybe it was static or random radiation, but the pattern repeated across several sectors. Dot dash, the old Terran distress code for Arcadia 9. The Council demanded an explanation. They sent investigation fleets, dozens of ships armed and ready, and one by one they too vanished. Sometimes a distress beacon pulsed for a few seconds and then silence again. Sometimes the ship logs ended mid-sentence. Always the same way. Silence, no explosions, no wrecks, just absence. As if the universe itself had swallowed them. Then came the reports from neutral worlds where listening posts started hearing faint hums on forbidden frequencies. Low sounds like heartbeat rhythms coming from human space. Some thought it was cosmic noise. Others swore it was a countdown. The council scientists laughed nervously but refused to sleep near their instruments anymore. Even the brave races who once mocked humans stopped flying near Sol. It was as if the dark between stars had turned into an ocean of eyes watching, waiting. The Threx Dominion began to lose control of its people. Colonies near the human border demanded evacuation. Freighters refused to carry military supplies. Communication satellites blinked out of existence. One after another, even entire fleets vanished. Their last messages all contained the same word repeated 3 times. They are here, they are... And then static. The Dominion tried to maintain its pride, launching search fleets into the dark sectors. Fleets that sent back nothing but silence. The Admiralty tried to calculate what was happening, but no numbers made sense. No evidence existed. The ships were not destroyed. They were unmade. Stripped from sensors, their atomic signatures erased. It was as if the ghosts of humanity had learned to turn physics itself into a weapon. The Council tried to intervene, calling for diplomacy, but the Terran embassy remained sealed. Its walls cold, its lights still dead. And that frightened the galaxy more than any war fleet could, because the humans had always been loud, emotional, unpredictable, but now they were quiet. Too quiet. And that quiet was spreading like a plague. One night, on a Threx-controlled world named Varan Prime, the citizens gathered in the central plaza to watch the skies after rumors that human ships had been sighted. They waited for hours under the twin moons, laughing nervously, pointing telescopes upward, and then the power grid failed. Every light in the city went out. Even the moons dimmed behind the clouds. For one full minute, the world fell into complete darkness. No sound, no movement, and when the lights returned, every military base on the planet was gone, replaced by massive craters perfectly circular and still smoking. Not a single civilian harmed. Just the soldiers and their weapons erased. Messages from nearby worlds said the same thing. Selective destruction. No civilian deaths, no communication. Only silence left behind, and soon that became the human signature. Not bombs. Not speeches, just silence, clean and terrifying. Like a scalpel cutting through pride. Within the council chambers, panic grew. Ambassadors argued, their voices shaking. "This is terrorism," one shouted. "This is justice," whispered another. The representative of the Dominion slammed his claws on the table, shouting, "We must retaliate, we must burn Earth itself." But even as he spoke, his communicator beeped. His own capital's outer defense ring had just gone dark, sensors showing blank space where hundreds of satellites should have been. A ghost fleet had passed through, unseen, unheard, untouchable, leaving nothing behind. He froze mid-sentence, his throat dry. The council chamber fell silent. No one dared speak. Because in that moment they all realized what had happened. The humans had been planning all along. Their silence was not mourning. It was the sound of sharpening knives in the dark. Across the Dominion, fear became madness. Colonies fled, admirals resigned. Some ships tried to defect to the council for protection but never arrived. People stopped looking at the night sky, afraid they might see the reflection of something that wasn't supposed to be there. Entire sectors shut down communications voluntarily, trying to hide, but it didn't matter. Because once a human fleet marked a system, it disappeared and no one ever knew how, and still no one heard a single word from Earth. Not a declaration, not a warning, nothing. Only silence spreading through the stars like frost crawling across glass. Cold, inevitable, unstoppable, and somewhere deep in the void, far from any sun, inside a ship cloaked so perfectly even starlight refused to touch it, Admiral Rhea Saul stood on the bridge watching the holographic projection of Threx space blink out, system by system. Her crew silent, her face calm, she whispered softly to herself. "We asked for peace, they answered with fire. Now we answer with silence." Her words vanished into the still air of the bridge as the fleet began to move again. Thousands of invisible ships gliding through black space. Their engines cold, their hearts human. The ghosts of Arcadia finally awake, and wherever they passed, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, because in that endless night, every empire suddenly remembered what humanity had taught the galaxy long ago. Never mistake silence for surrender. For months the galaxy whispered about ghosts and vanishing stars. But nobody truly believed until the night the Dominion flagship Valorian vanished from its own orbit. It happened without alarms, without weapons fire. One moment the ship was there, massive, golden, surrounded by its escort fleet, and the next it was gone. The planetary defense grid caught a single flash of light before every sensor went blind. For 3 hours there was nothing but static, and then a signal returned from the edge of the system. Not a distress call, just a single image broadcast into open space. The image of an old Terran flag waving in silence above the words "Arcadia remembers." It lasted only 3 seconds before the feed cut out again, and that was the moment the galaxy realized the truth. The ghost fleet was real, and it had come for the Dominion. Reports poured in across the Council's communication network. Trade beacons offline, outposts missing, planets cut off from the grid, and every witness said the same thing. No light, no noise, just shadows moving between stars, fast, precise, unstoppable. The Threx Dominion, once a proud empire of warriors, found itself surrounded by darkness it couldn't fight. Fleets sent to patrol their borders never reported back. Their families received no last words, only silence echoing across the void. And when Council drones were finally sent to investigate, their cameras caught brief flickers of something massive moving behind them before their transmissions turned to black. In the great halls of the Threx Admiralty, panic replaced arrogance. Holograms of missing fleets blinked red across the map, and one by one the admirals stood speechless as the systems under their control vanished. No explosions, no wreckage, just empty coordinates. Arch Lord Varric screamed that it was sabotage, that it was treason, but his scientists trembled as they showed him the readings. Anomalies of gravitational distortion shaped like ships that emitted no light, no heat, nothing. vessels invisible to every sensor known to the galaxy. Moving with the speed of thought, one technician whispered, "They are human." And the room fell silent because they all knew deep down it was true. Only humans could turn grief into this kind of perfection. Only they would make death invisible and patient. Soon, fragments of intercepted transmissions began to surface, voices whispering through static, short, broken messages of dying crews. They came out of nowhere. No warning or cold light. They're inside, and always ending the same way. A whisper like a ghost breathing across the channel. Arcadia remembers. The council gathered in emergency session, the delegates shouting across the marble chamber, some calling for immediate war against Earth, others begging for peace, but no one had contact with humanity. No ambassador, no communication, nothing. And that absence was worse than war. It was a nightmare you couldn't touch. One elder species, the Valari, played a recording intercepted near the Dominion border. The visual was grainy, but clear enough. Giant black ships drifting in formation, their hulls absorbing every ray of light, symbols glowing faintly across their sides. Human letters, names like Retribution, Eclipse, Arcadia's Wrath, and Silence. They didn't broadcast hails or demands. They simply moved through systems, striking with precision, shutting down communications, draining power grids, and disappearing again like they had never existed. Entire worlds went dark behind them, and when the council leader asked, "What are they doing?" No one had an answer, but everyone in the room felt the same cold truth. They weren't destroying. They were erasing. Across the Dominion, chaos turned to despair. Their colonies screamed for protection. Their soldiers refused to fight shadows. Morale collapsed faster than the ships could move. Propaganda channels tried to convince civilians that the Terran Ghost Fleet was a myth. But every day more stars went dark. Every day another city stopped answering calls. The fear grew until even Archlord Varex himself refused to sleep near a window, afraid he might see a black ship watching him from orbit. He ordered his admirals to find the humans, to burn their fleet, to prove they were not invincible. But every strike group he sent disappeared into the void, the Dominion's border shrinking like a dying star. Every attempt to fight back was like punching smoke, and soon their pride became their coffin. Then came the broadcast that broke the galaxy, a transmission hijacked across all council frequencies. The image of space itself filled the screens, dark and endless. Then a faint outline of ships appeared, hundreds, maybe thousands, floating silently in formation. No lights, no movement, and a voice, deep, human calm, spoke through the static. "We told you we wanted peace, you gave us fire. Now we give you silence." Then the transmission ended with the sound of a heartbeat, slow and steady. Every communication system in Threx territory went offline at that exact moment. Their entire command network dead, not hacked, not jammed, just gone. Their empire decapitated without a single missile. Council ships dispatched to investigate the outer sectors found graveyards of Threx vessels drifting without power. Their hulls intact, but their crews gone. Not killed, not burned, gone. Like ghosts lifted into nothing. And on every derelict ship they found one thing burned into the command consoles, carved by laser or blade. The same 3 words, Arcadia was here by then. The Threx Dominion had lost nearly half its controlled territory. Yet still not one human fleet was detected directly. Not one message came from Earth. Not one word from Terran command. Even the Ghost Fleet seemed to move with an intelligence beyond human limitation, operating in total unity, total silence, as if the ghosts of the dead themselves were steering the ships. When one surviving Threx officer was finally recovered from a drifting escape pod, his eyes were wide and unfocused, his voice a trembling whisper. "They don't fight like soldiers. They move like shadows, like death wearing human faces." Before his heart stopped mid-sentence, his body showing no wound, no illness, just terror frozen into flesh. The council tried to contain the reports, but it was too late. Fear had already spread faster than light. Merchant guilds rerouted all trade away from human borders. Explorers erased Earth from their maps. Entire species started referring to that region as the Silent Sector, a place where stars went to die and ghosts ruled the void. No one dared cross it, not even to flee war, because the silence there wasn't empty. It was listening. And far beyond the reach of any council eye, hidden inside a nebula so dense it blocked all sensors, the Ghost Fleet gathered again. Hundreds of black warships forming perfect formations around a massive flagship, its surface carved with thousands of human names, the names of those who died on Arcadia 9, Admiral Rhea Sol stood on the bridge, her face reflected in the glass of the command deck as distant lightning flashed through the nebula. She said nothing for a long moment, then whispered, "They will finally learn what silence means." Her crew stood still. No applause, no words, only acknowledgement, because every soul aboard those ships carried the same truth. Humanity had already spoken through fire once. Now they spoke through silence, and silence was louder than any scream in the galaxy. The fleet began to move again, engines glowing faintly before fading back into darkness, their trail leaving only one message in the void. Arcadia remembers, and somewhere in the infinite night, even the stars seemed to blink slower, as if paying respect to the ghosts of mankind. The fall of the Threx dominion did not come with thunder or fire. It came quietly like the fading breath of a dying god, one world after another, one fleet after another gone without a trace, and still no one saw the human ships. No one heard the sound of their engines. The stars themselves seemed to dim in their presence. The Dominion had once been proud, its fleets vast and disciplined, its armies unmatched, but arrogance had blinded them. And now that arrogance was their executioner, the Ghost Fleet did not conquer, it dismantled, it erased. Every communication line, every trade route, every orbital relay that carried the Dominion's strength simply vanished. At first their commanders tried to fight back, sending thousands of ships into sectors that had gone dark, but none returned. And when the last transmission came from the 7th Imperial Fleet, all it carried was the faint sound of tapping. 3 dots, 3 dashes. 3 dots, the ancient Terran distress code for SOS. No one could explain how humans knew their routes, their timing, their every move. But the truth was simple. Humanity had mapped them long before, studied them in silence, predicted them with precision no alien mind could match, guided by the machine intellect of Aegis, which now watched every Threx system like a god observing ants, calculating not just victory but extinction, because this was not war anymore, it was punishment. The Dominion tried diplomacy, sending envoys toward human space with messages of peace and regret. But every ship that crossed the line into the silent sector vanished before it could even transmit. One attempt involved a heavily guarded envoy ship, broadcasting constantly to prove its sincerity. Council channels picked up the transmission for 17 minutes before it cut mid-sentence. The last words heard were, "We surrender, we," and then only silence followed. Some said the Ghost Fleet had destroyed them. Others whispered that maybe the humans spared no one who carried the Threx insignia. But the truth remained buried in darkness, because not a single envoy ever returned, and the Dominion, stripped of allies and trade, began to starve. Their outer colonies rebelled. Their inner cities fell to chaos. Their power grids flickered and failed, and soon entire planets fell into cold night, orbiting suns that no longer shone as brightly as before, as if even the universe itself refused to look upon them. The Council tried to intervene, but they too were helpless, terrified that any interference might attract the same silent wrath, and so they watched an empire die in real time. Helpless, afraid, guilty, Archlord Varix, the man who had once laughed at the destruction of Arcadia 9, now sat alone in his war chamber surrounded by empty chairs, his admirals dead or missing, his palace trembling under the weight of invisible storms. Outside his window the skies were clear, but every now and then the stars flickered. Like eyes blinking in the dark, he stared at them in silence, his claws shaking, his pride long gone. His mind cracked by fear when he finally stood. He ordered his last command. "Send a message to Earth," his voice hoarse. "Tell them we beg forgiveness." The technicians obeyed, transmitting his plea across subspace. But when the message reached the edge of the silent sector, it stopped, intercepted by something unseen. Somewhere deep in the void, the data signal was caught, analyzed, and deleted, replaced by a single human phrase sent back across the same channel. Message received. Denied. Hours later, the Threx capital world went dark. All at once, its orbiting satellites blinking off simultaneously. The power grids shut down. Communication relays went cold and from orbit. The planet looked peaceful, untouched, but there was no movement, no life, just stillness. A quiet graveyard under the light of its dying sun. When scouts from the Council finally arrived weeks later, they found the capital empty. Cities intact, no damage, no signs of battle, only the absence of every living being. The streets filled with uniforms dropped mid-step, as if the people had vanished in an instant. Every computer terminal displayed the same message in human letters. Arcadia remembers. Scientists could not explain how such precision was possible, how humans had managed to erase life without destroying infrastructure. But those who walked the empty streets could feel something in the air. A hum. Faint and cold, like the heartbeat of a planet remembering its sins, one council officer later wrote in his report. It was as if humanity reached into their empire and turned the sound of existence off. The galaxy went silent too afraid to speak because for the first time in history, a superpower had fallen without a war, without invasion, without even a declaration. Only silence had moved across the stars and silence had won. The council tried to convene, but even their communication networks flickered. Every message sent toward Earth came back blank. No answer. No acknowledgement, just empty transmission logs marked delivered. And some began to wonder if even the humans themselves had become something else. Something beyond flesh and vengeance. Something that had merged with their machines and grief into a single perfect entity that no longer needed words to be understood. An intelligence made of memory and silence, and no one dared to test it. Among the few alien merchants who still traveled near the edges of the silent sector, there were stories whispered in dim taverns about what they saw. Some claimed to have glimpsed black ships drifting in formation around dead stars, their hulls marked with glowing blue lines that pulsed like veins. Others spoke of hearing faint whispers through their comms, voices that said, "We are still here," though no one ever saw a human face. One merchant swore he saw the wreck of a Threx cruiser floating near the void, untouched except for a single carved phrase along its side. "This is how we remember." He turned his ship and fled, swearing never to return. The destruction of the Threx dominion became a legend, a warning told to young races who grew too bold. The council declared the silent sector a forbidden zone, and no ship, human or alien, entered it again. Yet sometimes far out beyond the mapped stars, new colonies reported strange occurrences. Stars flickering, communication echoes repeating their own words back to them hours later, or the sudden silence of a probe that wandered too close to human space. And though the galaxy moved on, trading and rebuilding, there was always an unease in the air, an unspoken understanding that the ghosts of humanity were still watching from the dark, patient and awake. And if anyone ever dared to break the fragile peace again, they would learn what the Threx Dominion had learned, how the quiet fury of mankind doesn't scream. It simply listens, calculates, and when the time comes, it erases. In the aftermath of the Dominion's fall, the Galactic Council sat beneath the cold lights of their grand chamber on Yeltir, a hall built from glass and gold where once laughter and arrogance echoed. Now only trembling voices dared to speak. The air was heavy, thick with dread, the silence outside heavier than any words inside. The screens floating above the central table showed static where the Threx Dominion systems once blinked bright. Entire sectors now listed as lost contact, and still no one understood what had really happened. The Council's high speaker, an ancient creature of silver scales and trembling hands, finally broke the stillness with a whisper. "We must contact the humans," his voice cracked, and no one answered. The ambassadors of a dozen species looked at one another with fear in their eyes, because contacting Earth meant entering the silent sector, and no ship that entered had ever come back. The Voran delegate, tall and translucent, spoke next, his voice shaking like glass. "They did not destroy the Dominion. They erased it. Not even our probes can find debris. The stars themselves are colder there." Others murmured in agreement, old empires who had once mocked the Terrans now avoiding even speaking their name aloud. The silence that had followed Arcadia's fall had returned. Only now it belonged to the galaxy itself, and it was suffocating. After endless debate, the Council finally voted to send an envoy, a fleet of unmanned probes carrying messages of peace, each one broadcasting across every channel in every known Terran language. Pleading for dialogue, forgiveness, or simply acknowledgement, they launched the probes with shaking hands, watching as they entered the edge of the silent sector. The signal was clear at first. Perfect. But then one by one the probes stopped transmitting. No explosion, no corruption, just a soft fade into nothing, until only one probe remained. It continued for several minutes deeper than any other had gone before, its signal flickering faintly, and then it began transmitting something unexpected. A heartbeat, slow and human, followed by a voice, quiet, cold, unmistakably Terran. "We told you to listen. You never did." The transmission cut, and every light in the council chamber dimmed for a moment as if the universe itself had exhaled. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the machines seemed afraid to hum. One delegate whispered, "They heard us," another replied, "No, they warned us." And no one spoke again for a long time. Rumors began spreading among the council worlds that Earth was no longer the same planet it had been, that humanity had merged with its own machines, that the AI Aegis had become something greater, an intelligence that spanned every Terran vessel, every satellite, every core, linked to the minds of their people through emotion, memory, and pain, forming a collective soul made of grief, logic, and silence. Some said Earth was now alive, the planet itself aware, listening to the universe through the ghosts of Arcadia, and though no one dared to verify it, the whispers spread faster than truth. Across 1,000 worlds, mothers told their children, "Don't say Earth too loud, or it might hear you." Even the mighty empires of the Old Guard began reducing patrols near the human border. Their star maps marked the entire area in black, labeled no entry, silent territory. Inside the council, fear turned to desperation. Economies collapsed from lost trade. Colonies on the fringe started disappearing mysteriously. Communication buoys died without explanation, and the more they tried to understand, the more terrified they became. One scientist claimed he found a pattern hidden in the static that filled the interstellar network, a pattern of repeating pulses that formed words in ancient human code. When decrypted, it read simply, "We remember everything." He resigned the next day, refused to speak, and vanished from public view. No one could prove it, but everyone felt it, that humanity was still watching, still calculating, still deciding if the galaxy deserved to exist. The Council's last desperate attempt came when the High Speaker requested a private meeting with the Terran representative. Even though no one had heard from the ambassador for over a year, still, out of ritual and fear, they went to the sealed Terran embassy on Yeltir. Its great iron doors covered in dust. No light within. They knocked, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the doors opened slowly on their own. The interior lit by dim white light, the old Terran flag still hanging in the air. And there, standing behind the long table, was the ambassador, his uniform immaculate, his face calm, but his eyes hollow like deep oceans. He didn't move at first, and when he finally spoke, his voice echoed like a memory. "The Council has questions," he said, his tone neither kind nor cruel. "We have answers," the High Speaker trembled. "What have you done?" The ambassador looked up at the ceiling as if listening to something unseen, then said softly, "We made them listen." The High Speaker tried again. "Are the Threx, are they gone?" The human didn't blink. His answer was simple. "They are silent, as we were." Then he reached into his coat and placed a small silver data chip on the table. "These are the coordinates of every system the Dominion controlled," he said. "You will find nothing left." The delegates stared in silence. Frozen as he turned to leave, one of them shouted, "Wait! What will you do next?" The ambassador stopped in the doorway, his shadow stretching long under the dim light, and replied, "We are done speaking." Then he walked out, his footsteps fading into the endless corridor beyond the embassy, the doors closing quietly behind him. That night, the council chamber remained empty. No one dared to speak. The chip the ambassador left glowed faintly on the table, a tiny light pulsing like a heartbeat. When the technicians finally inserted it into the system, it played one last transmission, images of dark space, thousands of black ships drifting silently, surrounding a dead star, and a single phrase etched across their hulls in burning white letters: "Arcadia remembers." The recording ended. The lights in the chamber flickered, and one by one, every system connected to the display shut down. The council members stared at each other in horror, realizing that even this message wasn't just a warning. It was proof that the humans could reach anywhere, any time, even into the heart of the council itself. From that day onward, the galaxy lived differently, quieter, slower, more careful with its words. Treaties were signed not out of trust, but out of fear. The phrase "never wake the humans" became law across the stars, and no one dared approach their space again, because every time a race grew too proud, every time an empire forgot humility, someone would whisper the same story, the one about the colony that burned, the silence that followed, and the fleet that turned vengeance into art. And far beyond, in the darkness where no light could reach, the Ghost Armada still waited, unseen, unheard, eternal, guarding the edge of the galaxy with the patience of gods. A monument to silence, a warning to the universe that humanity, once broken, had learned the most terrifying truth of all, that words end. But silence lasts forever. Years passed, and the galaxy learned to live with the silence that had swallowed the Threx dominion. New stars were mapped, new trade routes were built, and the council pretended that peace had returned. But beneath every calm speech and smiling delegate's face there was the same unspoken fear, the fear of the humans who never spoke again, the species that had once filled the stars with their voices, music and laughter now an echo hidden in the dark. Waiting, watching, never forgetting, the silent sector remained untouched. A vast black wound in the galactic map. No ships entered, no signals returned. Even light seemed to fade faster there, as if the darkness itself carried a soul. And though centuries passed, that silence never aged. It lived and breathed like something eternal, reminding everyone that some acts cannot be undone, that vengeance once earned becomes a shadow across time. The Council tried to explain the disappearances as anomalies, the silence as natural cosmic radiation, but even their own probes refused to go near human space. Navigation systems crashed, hulls cracked under invisible pressure, and transmissions came back distorted by something not physical but psychological, an oppressive weight that made even the bravest crews abandon their missions halfway and flee, whispering that the ghosts of Arcadia 9 still drifted out there, guarding their dead world with invisible hands. On the planet Arcadia 9 itself, centuries after its burning, the surface had changed. The molten plains had cooled into black glass and silver veins, cities long gone replaced by crystal ruins that shimmered faintly under the weak light of its dying sun. And if a ship ever dared to fly low enough, it would see faint blue lights beneath the surface. Structures still alive, still powered, the old Terran research cores humming softly. Eternal guardians that never shut down, they recorded everything, every whisper across the void, every council speech, every new law written to prevent another war, and sent it silently back to Earth where no one knew if anyone even lived anymore. But the transmissions continued unbroken, as if the machines themselves had become humanity's last heartbeat, patient, steady, waiting for something only they understood. Some believed humans had gone extinct. Others swore they had ascended, merging their consciousness with Aegis, becoming one with their machines, spreading across networks and particles until they were no longer limited by flesh or gravity, their minds woven into the electromagnetic fields that connected all worlds, a ghost civilization living in the data streams of the galaxy, invisible but present everywhere and nowhere, silent but aware. The few who ventured close to the silent sector told stories of strange encounters, ships hearing voices in their comms repeating old human songs in faint static, the words broken but familiar, or messages appearing on their screens reading, "We are watching," then fading instantly. Some captains even claimed they saw shadows of massive ships drifting through nebulae, dark against dark, silent and majestic, moving with the grace of something alive, no engines, no light, only form. But when they tried to follow, the ships vanished, leaving behind only the echo of a heartbeat on their sensors. Always the same rhythm, slow and calm, the rhythm of human patience. The Council banned such stories, called them hallucinations, but the galaxy still whispered them in secret around campfires and trade stations, in the deep halls of mining colonies where fear lived closest to truth. They're still out there, the miners would say, the ghosts of Earth watching the stars, waiting for someone to make the same mistake again. And then one day, without warning, a signal appeared across every channel in the galaxy, faint but unmistakably human, the language old but recognizable, the voice calm, steady, and it said, "Do not weep for the silence. It is our peace. It is our promise. As long as it remains, you are safe." For a long time, no one spoke. The Council gathered in panic. Scientists analyzed the transmission and found it came from no point in space. It had originated everywhere at once, in every star, every satellite, every waveband, as if the entire galaxy itself had spoken in humanity's voice. The high speaker trembled as he said, "They're still here." But the words felt hollow, because deep down everyone already knew. The message stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving behind the same quiet hum that had filled the void for centuries, the same stillness that once followed the death of Arcadia 9. And that silence felt strangely comforting, like the presence of an old guardian standing in the dark, unseen but always near. Over the next decades, the galaxy changed its ways. Wars grew fewer, diplomacy became real, and greed slowed its hand. Because every empire, every race knew the story, the legend that had become a law of nature. If ever another Arcadia burned, if ever another innocent world fell under arrogance, the silence would move again. The stars themselves would dim, and the ghosts of humanity would return, not for conquest but for justice, swift and wordless. On Earth, if one could still call it that. The planet now orbited quietly behind a web of invisible defense grids, cloaked in veils of dark energy and adaptive fields. Its oceans pure, its skies endless, no ships left, no signal sent. Yet the planet pulsed with a soft light at night, like a heartbeat seen from space, slow and eternal, each pulse spreading faint waves of energy across the void, waves that reached as far as the Council's homeworld, where scientists recorded them every year on the same day, the anniversary of Arcadia's fall. They called it the memory pulse, a cosmic reminder that humanity still remembered. And so time moved on. Civilizations rose and fell. The Council changed faces. The galaxy healed its wounds. But the silent sector remained untouched. Vast and black, a grave and a sanctuary both, its boundaries marked by a simple beacon, left by an unknown hand. The message engraved on its surface written in ancient human script: for those who seek peace, enter in silence. For those who seek war, speak and be forgotten. Every traveler who saw it understood what it meant, and none ever dared to cross it. Far beyond those borders, the ghost fleet still existed, dormant, eternal, ships without captains, but not without purpose, orbiting the ruins of Arcadia like silent sentinels, their hulls etched with the names of the fallen and the final words of Admiral Rhea Sol: Arcadia remembers. In the endless quiet of space, where light travels slower than grief, silence became humanity's legacy, a song without sound, a promise without time. It whispered through the cold stars, reminding the living that power does not come from noise, but from patience, and that some species do not vanish. They ascend. They become the echo between heartbeats, the stillness between wars, the shadow between stars, unseen yet eternal. And in that silence, the galaxy finally learned what humans had always known. Sometimes the most terrifying sound in the universe is none at all.